Hello, everybody, and welcome to my presentation. My name is April King, and I'm an information security engineer at Mozilla. And I'm here today to talk about Let's Encrypt. But before I get started, I'd just like to thank the NGINX people for having me come speak to you all, especially about a topic that is kind of only tangentially related to NGINX itself. Now, speaking of the NGINX people, if they had done their research on me properly, they probably would have learned that I am a noted misanthropist. And as somebody who really likes to make my audience suffer, I like to begin all of my presentations with a little history lesson. So I'm going to take you all back to the year 1995. And in the year 1995, the Mars Corporation removed the tan M&M from M&Ms, ruining them for me forever by replacing them with those blasphemous blue M&Ms. But more importantly, in the year 1995, an up-and-coming company by the name of Netscape Communications released a web browser. Now, this web browser was not just any web browser. No, this browser was special. This browser, for the first time, had support for a protocol called SHTTP, which would later become known as HTTPS. And for the first time in history, everybody had access to secure, private communications over an unsecure network such as the internet. And this was a really big deal. Now, obviously, back in 1995, encryption did exist. I mean, if you were a huge company, you could hire IBM, and they would send out an army of contractors, and they would set up your mainframes with encryption, and you could have encryption back and forth between your data centers, and that was fine. Or if you were obviously the federal government, you had your army of cryptographers and mathematicians. And even some very technical people could use tools like PGP, and you could set up a PGP key pair, and you could try to convince your friends to set up PGP, and you could send messages back and forth. But by and large, all of this technology was beyond the reach of an average person. And that's why HTTPS was so important. Now, if you guys are good at arithmetic, you've probably figured out that 1995, besides being the year that M&Ms died, was 21 years ago. 21 years. So you're probably thinking in your head, well, if it's been 21 years, surely by now the entire internet, every website is using HTTPS. I mean, right? It's been 21 years. But unfortunately, what we have found at Mozilla is that is far from the case. Now, this is data that users have decided to share with us, Firefox users who have agreed to opt in to share telemetry. And what we found is that only 46% of initial page requests are done over HTTPS, and only about 63% of subsequent requests are done over HTTPS. Now, that would be things like JavaScript, style sheets, and images. Now, this is really, really bad. If you're in my line of work, this is a really terrible and terrifying statistic. Because without HTTPS, with just plain HTTP, you lose a lot of things. For example, with plain HTTP, you don't have confidentiality. And what that means is that when you go to a website, anybody who's listening on the network, be it in the coffee shop or somewhere on the internet, can spy on everything you're doing. So if you send credit card numbers, social security numbers, private emails, they get to read all of them. Furthermore, you don't have what's known as authenticity, which means you don't know you are talking to who you think you are talking to. So you might type www.mozilla.org into your web browser, and you might get a website that looks just like www.mozilla.org. And you might go to download Firefox, and you get this big executable, and it looks like Firefox, but really it's a Trojan Firefox install. And you don't know that because you went to the website over plain HTTP, and somebody else changed what you were seeing by pretending to be Mozilla. And furthermore, you don't have what is known as integrity, which means that somebody who's in the middle of your communications can inject traffic into what you're trying to do. And we actually see this a lot at Mozilla. If you are from the United States, you might be familiar with what is known as the Verizon supercookie, where Verizon partnered up with a bunch of companies to secretly inject tracking cookies when you would browse to HTTP websites from your phone, and they could track you from one site to another. But it's not just Verizon. I mean, lots of network providers do this. We see this a lot overseas. We see companies, particularly telecommunication companies, injecting content such as malicious JavaScript, malware, but also very commonly advertisements into pages that you are going to view. And they don't just inject advertisements, but they also replace advertisements on pages you're already viewing. So, if you're going to your favorite, Pokemon fan fiction website, which is supported by one person, and they pay for it out of, the small earnings they get from offering up advertisements, if those ads get replaced with somebody else's ads, that means that person is not getting money to pay for their website, and that means that your favorite, Pokemon, fan fiction website could go away at any moment because they can't afford to pay for it otherwise. That's a really big deal, and can be a real problem for some sites. So you're probably now thinking in your heads, well, April, you work at Mozilla, a company that makes a web browser, Firefox. So how come you personally have not fixed this problem? In fact, why is it so hard to fix? Well, like many things in life, the answer is very simple. It's not going to surprise you, people. Here's the answer. It's money. Yes, the answer, of course, is money. See, when you set up a website and you want to use HTTPS, you need what is called a digital certificate. Now, a digital certificate is kind of like a driver's license for a website, right? It identifies the website to the browsers and the people that are verifying it so that when they connect, they can verify cryptographically, mathematically, that they are, in fact, talking to who they think they are talking to. Now, these certificates are sold by some 2,000 or so entities called certificate authorities, and these certificate authorities want to make money. Now, I don't blame them for this. I mean, if you were to come up to me after the presentation, I highly recommend this, come up to me after the presentation and be like, April, would you like some money? I would say yes. I would say, thank you, good sir or madam, for the money. And I don't blame the certificate authorities for wanting money either. I mean, they have engineers to pay. They've got servers to run. It's not cheap to run a certificate authority. But unfortunately, whenever you're dealing with things that involve money, the user experience tends to be difficult. So, because this helps lock people into, a product that they've been paying for. So, I don't know how many of you have gotten certificates in the past, but this has generally been how the process goes. You go over to your computer, and you bring up a terminal. And in that terminal, you type an arcane command to open SSL or whatever, and it generates a private key. And then you take that private key, and you run another obscure command, and it generates what's called a certificate signing request. And then you take that file, that text, and you might go to your certificate authority's website, and you paste that text in there, and you click submit, and pay them some money, because they like money. Who doesn't? And then, they verify that you are who you say you are, and then, some way, like maybe with email, maybe they connect to your website, whatever. And then eventually you get a certificate and you download it, copy it to your server, and it's a huge pain in the butt. But here's the thing. It's the pain in the butt that you know, right? If you've been dealing with this super painful process, you might think, wow, this really, really sucks, but I know how to do it. And I don't want to have to learn how to do this same awful process with a different certificate authority. It doesn't matter if they're a little bit cheaper. I know how to do it with this one, right? Well, those days of arcane commands and piles of money for certificates are over, because Let's Encrypt is here to save the day. Now, I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to go right into the real meat of why Let's Encrypt is so amazing, why everybody gets so excited. And the reason is because it's a free certificate authority. Now, that means you can get a free certificate from them regardless of who you are or how much money you have or where you are located. If you are well-known jet setter Elon Musk driving around in your sweet Teslas that they keep refusing to send me free ones of, you, sir, get a free digital certificate. Or, if you're an 8-year-old girl setting up your first website for the first time and you think, I want my website visitors to have HTTPS, well, she can also get a free digital certificate. It's pretty amazing. And this is particularly important for people who are in countries where they might not have local certificate authorities. And so they have to buy certificates rather, from certificate authorities that are in a foreign country, and whenever you're buying stuff from foreign countries, there's duties, there's taxes, commerce laws, things get very, very complicated. But when it's free, you can just go to Let's Encrypt. All of a sudden, that becomes easy and painless. So furthermore, Let's Encrypt is an automated CA. See, when you are, most of the pain, most of the agony of getting a certificate historically has been in the process of verifying who owns a domain, that you own the domain that you claim to own. And Let's Encrypt uses a protocol, which I'll talk about a little bit later. It's a protocol that's in the process of being standardized to verify domain control. And it uses that same process for revoking certificates and that same process for renewing certificates. Now, you might see a little thing up here on the screen. This is the command that runs on my personal web server. It runs every single night. And what it does is it says, hey, let's check the local file system and see if the certificate has less than 30 days left in its lifetime. And if it does, we'll just go out to Let's Encrypt to get a new one. And then let's restart NGINX. And that's what it does. It's run every night. It's been running for over a year now. I've gotten new certificates plenty of times. I haven't had to think, not even once, about gaining a new certificate. It's so easy. It's delightful. So furthermore, besides being automated and free, it is a transparent certificate authority. And what I mean by transparent, it means that every certificate that Let's Encrypt generates is logged to a central log called the certificate transparency log. And a number of CAs have their own certificate transparency logs. And so that means that when you see a certificate from Let's Encrypt, you can go and you can check to make sure that Let's Encrypt actually did generate that certificate. Furthermore, you can be sure that Let's Encrypt is not generating certificates maliciously, right? Because if you saw a certificate in the wild that was from Let's Encrypt, you would be able to look and see that it wasn't in the certificate transparency log, and you would know immediately that they were doing something wrong. But I mean, they're not going to because they're amazing. But that's a guarantee. It brings some openness and sunshine to what has historically been, kind of an impenetrable world of certificate authorities. Furthermore, Let's Encrypt is an open certificate authority. And that means that everything they do, not just, so that would include the code that generates the certificates, but also the software that requests the certificates, the website, the documentation, everything that they do is open source and available on GitHub. And in fact, even this presentation, as terrible as it is also on GitHub. You can go and download it yourself. I tweeted it out from my account if you want to go and show these slides to your friends and family. They're right up there, up on GitHub. You can modify them yourself. And lastly, it's a cooperative certificate authority. So see, a couple years ago, when Mozilla decided to go out and start up Let's Encrypt, they found some really great partners at Acme and Cisco and the Electronic Frontier Foundation. And they also thought this was a great idea to bring certificates to everybody. And so they supported us with their donations, and that's how we got it running. And since then, a whole pile of organizations, you can see them up on your screen, have recognized the importance of Let's Encrypt, and they also support it with their donations, which helps ensure that Let's Encrypt has a stable funding base and should be around for years to come, making it safe for you to build into your tool chains should you desire to do so. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about tool chains and the process of domain verification. Now, Let's Encrypt, when it was designed, they worked on creating a protocol. And this protocol was called Acme, short for the Automated Certificate Management Environment. I know that because I can look at the screen. And it helps answer the burning question that all certificate authorities are trying to answer. And that is that if somebody asks for a certificate, how do you verify that they own what they say they own? For example, if I go to unnamed certificate authority X, and I say, hi, my name is April King, but I am also definitely Amazon.com. That certificate authority should say, April, we've had our eyes on you. You look pretty shifty. I don't think you are, in fact, Amazon.com, and I am not going to give you a certificate. And that's good. That's how they're supposed to behave, because if they did give me the certificate for Amazon.com, then I could be Amazon.com on the internet, regardless of whether or not somebody is using HTTPS. So this process of validation with Acme is done in 3 possible different ways. The first way is by asking the domain owner to create a specific domain record under their domain. with a specific value inside it. And if if a domain owner is able to create a DNS record with a specific value, Let's Encrypt, decides that yes, you do in fact own the domain and you can get a certificate. Another way that it does it is it asks the domain owner to spin up a website, a regular plain website, and put a specific file with specific contents in a specific directory and location. And if you can do that right off the root of the website, then they also verify that you own the domain. And lastly, they ask you, another way they can do it is asking you to spin up a TLS server. So you spin up a server listening on port 443 with a self-signed certificate, and Let's Encrypt connects to it, using the DNS records that point to that server for that domain, and they do have a little conversation, and they verify it that way. And this standard, this Acme standard, is in the process of being ratified by the IETF so that it can be used by all certificate authorities. Now, we actually already see other certificate authorities starting to adopt Acme. The most famous of which is known as StartCom. You might know it as StartSSL. They had their own API, their own web API, offering up free certs as well. And it had a whole bunch of very bad security problems with issuing certs that it shouldn't issue. And so they've since shut that down, and they are moving to Acme. And support for Acme is really nice. There's a really good web forum. There's also an IRC channel that you can go and get you can get support for. Now, because Acme is a standardized protocol, it means that it's very easy to build tools around it. And we see this all over the place. No matter what language you use, pretty much these days, anything from Golang to Bash to whatever, there are tools around it. And in fact, the vision is hopefully in the future that web servers will come, such as NGINX, hopefully, will have support for Acme built in, so that when you set up your website for the first time, all you have to do is you say SSL on. There's your configuration directive. When NGINX starts up, it says, oh, I don't have a certificate for this yet. I'm going to go out to Let's Encrypt or whatever certificate authority you want and get a certificate, and it's done. You don't have to set up any configuration files. You don't have to do any munging. It's just done automatically for you. That is the future. And in fact, we've seen very impressive adoption for Let's Encrypt across the industry. A number of very large web hosts, such as Dreamhost, Acme, and WordPress, have integrated it into their platform, which means like customers who previously had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of different domain names and websites, who never had HTTPS before because the cost was prohibitive, or the difficulty of getting a certificate was very high. Now just get certificates automatically. You sign up for a Dreamhost account, with your VPS or whatever it is, managed hosting. You just get a certificate. It's just super easy. And in fact, there has been some movement on getting it built directly into web servers. I'm going to show a very brief video. This is a web server called Caddy. It's written by a guy named Matt Holt. He's a nice guy. And his web server has support for Acme built in. And this is what the future is going to be, people. This is going to be how hard it is to get HTTPS working in the future. All right, so he's at his command line here. He's editing the configuration file for his website. It contains the domain name for his site. That's all that's in there. Now he's starting up his web server. It's going out to Let's Encrypt to get a certificate, and boom, it's got a certificate. That's how quick it was. Now you can just bring up his web browser, goes right to the site, and there it is, HTTPS. That's the future. We're talking 10 seconds from, deciding your domain name, putting it into a configuration file, to getting the site up and running with HTTPS. That's the future. It's going to be great. Now, Let's Encrypt has been around since their public release was in December of 2015. So you might be considering, well, how well is Let's Encrypt doing? And the answer is, they're doing really, really well. They've already issued, there are currently about 5.5 million or so outstanding unexpired certificates issued by Let's Encrypt. This covers, I believe, roughly 9 million domain names. And the reason why those numbers are not the same is because a given certificate can have more than one domain name in it. With Let's Encrypt, you can have up to 100 domain names in a given certificate. So they're already the largest issuer of certificates on the internet by number of certificates issued. which is amazing. It's hard to believe. In less than a year, they've become the largest certificate authority by numbers of certificates issued. And by our telemetry at Mozilla, they're the 21st most commonly encountered certificate authority on the web. Now you might be thinking, well, that's really weird. How can you be both the most popular certificate authority and the 21st most popular certificate authority? And the reason is that of the sites encrypted with Let's Encrypt, 94% have never had a certificate before. Let's Encrypt has helped bringing HTTPS and encryption to the long tail of the web, not just your Facebooks and your Googles, but people's personal blogs, very small companies that might just have a couple employees who could not afford the expense of hiring an engineer or buying a certificate. With Let's Encrypt, it becomes super easy. And it's very popular around the world, not just here in the US, although it is very popular here in the US, but it's popular. You can see here in France, we've got Canada, Germany, the Netherlands, Denmark, Great Britain. It's very, very popular in North America and Western Europe specifically. I can only speculate as to reasons why it's a little bit less popular in other parts of the world. It could be a combination of the lack of localization for documentation and software in certain languages. But I think the biggest blocker is internationalized domain name support, which I'll talk about shortly. But people all over the world are using Let's Encrypt, not just here in the United States. And it's really doing a fantastic job of growing the secure web. I already mentioned that Dreamhost and WordPress and Shopify are using Let's Encrypt to automatically provide free SSL certificates to their customers. I can see the Dreamhost guy taking a picture right now. Go Dreamhost. Very important software that are used by a lot of managed host providers such as cPanel and WHM have integrated certificate generation just built in. You just click a button and it gets a certificate for you. And if you recall back to the beginning of my presentation, if you think back, there was a really delicious looking pie chart at the beginning. Oh, it looked so yummy. I could really use some pie right now. And that pie chart showed that 46% of all connections are using HTTPS. Well, a year ago, 8 months ago, or whatever it was, in December of 2015 when Let's Encrypt was released, that number was only 38%. So in just 8 months, the percentage of sites using HTTPS, or percentage of connections going out, has risen 8%. That's, I don't know the exact numbers, it's hundreds of billions or possibly trillions of connections per day now being done over HTTPS. And that last year has brought some pretty cool things. So in January, they added support for DNS, domain name validation. In March, they added full support for XP. Before then, in March, they had the certificate cross-signed by a certificate authority that Windows XP trusted, which is a pretty big deal for those users. It's still very popular in a number of countries around the world. In July, they added full support for IPv6. That's not just their website, but that's also the systems that go out and connect to sites, the checkers that verify the domain name ownership. And they've increased the rate limits. When they were first released, they didn't quite understand how popular they would be, which has been very popular. But now you can get up to 20 certificates per domain per week. You can get 100 names per certificate, and you can get 5 duplicate certificates a week. But the best thing about this is that renewals are excluded. So if a domain has had a Let's Encrypt certificate before, and you're renewing it, that doesn't count towards your rate limit at all. So this allows very large companies who have maybe hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of domains to increase their presence, or they increase the number of sites with HTTPS over time without having to worry about running into rate limits. The near future, it looks bright too. So in November, we're going to add support for international, or they will add support for internationalized domains, which means domains that have non-ASCII characters in the domain name will be able to get certificates. So if if your domain name uses kanji or Cyrillic or katakana or whatever, those domains will be able to get free certificates from Let's Encrypt. In November, they're going to be included directly into Firefox's Trust Store. They've been fully audited by Mozilla, and they have met the requirements to be an official CA, included in our root certificate bundle. And lastly, and this one's kind of a weird one for you crypto nerds out there like myself, ECDSA intermediaries. I know that's a lot of letters I'll kind of push together and squeeze together, but what that means is smaller certificates and faster connections. Now, people often ask me, who should use HTTPS? Should I use HTTPS? I'm just a blog that has beautiful cat pictures jumping and frolicking around. Why do I need HTTPS? Who does it really hurt if I don't use HTTPS? And this is what I look like when they ask me that question. I look like Gary Oldman screaming, everyone! Because when you don't use HTTPS, you put your users at risk, and you put the whole internet at risk. When network providers can inject whatever content they want into those lovely cat picture pages, they can be attacking GitHub. They can be attacking whatever site they want, doing DDoS attacks that are very hard to mitigate. So my goal, and our goal at Mozilla, is to get every single website using HTTPS. Now, of course, the internet is more than just websites, right? I mean, it's also mail servers and IRC servers and a whole bunch of things. And those can use those can use Let's Encrypt as well. I run my own IRC server. It uses Let's Encrypt to get a certificate. Super easy. It's great. So anyways, that concludes my presentation. Thank you all for coming. If anybody has any questions, I would be happy to take them. I will state, I am not an official representative of Let's Encrypt. I'm just an evangelist, so there might be some things I can't answer. But if you have questions, just raise your hand, and somebody will come around. Is there somebody with a mic? OK.
Hi.
Hi.
So, full disclosure, I'm the Dreamhost guy. 2 quick comments and then 1 question. First comment was, I saw the note about future NGINX implementation. For people using OpenResty with Lua integration, there are a handful of OpenResty modules that automatically do Let's Encrypt renewals and grabbing a new cert through HTTP DCV. So that's something that's available for people using OpenResty already. Forgot my second point. So my question was, as a provider for somebody that's using Let's Encrypt's API, because they have an open API, we can see when they make changes for either the protocol or their site on GitHub. There's been a handful of times where there's been a breaking API change that's been pushed without any notification on a mailing list or anything like that, that's broken consumers' APIs. And it feels like it's been under the guise of, well, we're still kind of in beta, so we're going to break the API and then just deal with it. Are there any plans to sort of solidify that and have more of a formal release cycle for API changes or something like that in the future?
So I think what is happening is that the Acme Protocol is still kind of going through changes to be fully, completely baked. I mean, if you think about this, what Acme is doing, providing domain validation, it's solving a very hard problem, and it's trying to do it perfectly every time, which means that it needs to have extreme amounts of scrutiny. Like there's a number of professional cryptographers that have looked at the protocol and trying to solve various things in it, and because of that, there are changes on the kind of over time as they work out these bugs. I will say that I know that Let's Encrypt has a pretty active IRC channel and a pretty active forum, and I know a lot of stuff gets posted there. If you are a large service provider and you want to use Let's Encrypt, feel free to email me, just april@mozilla.com, and I can hook you up with contacts at Let's Encrypt that can hopefully keep you appraised of those changes coming in the future.
Hi there. Just a quick question about, do you know if Acme is going to be supporting wildcard certs anytime soon?
Yeah, so wildcard certs are something that people ask for quite often with Let's Encrypt. There's a lot of problems with wildcard certs. There's a number of there's a number of providers that just give, they will give people their own subdomain under their main domain. And so validating that somebody owns control of every single subdomain under a single domain is very difficult to do. So I know there are definitely people working on trying to figure out ways to make wildcard certs possible. But I don't think that's something that will necessarily happen very soon. The nice thing about Let's Encrypt is because, one of the biggest reasons why people use there's 2 big reasons why people use wildcard certs, right? One is that the ease of administration is very easy, right? You just keep installing the same cert on every single server, and it's done, right? And it works perfectly. So it's easy to use, and once you buy this one certificate, you can use it on as many systems as you want, and you don't have to keep paying certificate authorities again and again for new certificates. But those 2 problems are not really an issue with Let's Encrypt. With Let's Encrypt, you start up a new box, you just go and get a new certificate for that box. And you can get certificates that cover hundreds of different domain names. So if you just like spin up, like if you have systems where that spin up and down systems with as load happens, you can get certificates with 100 different domain names on them, and that often covers most people's use cases. So like between like the certificates being free and super easy to get, I think that's kind of meeting most people's wildcard certificate needs. So, but if you do need them, I mean, and there are lots of really good certificate authorities out there that still provide them.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. On the domain verification part, if you use DNS record or like put a file on the web server, that can put the dependencies on security of DNS infrastructure and the web server. So some people's DNS infrastructure is actually less secure than their web server. And what if the DNS infrastructure is like compromised, or it's DNS poisoning, or a web server gets compromised, someone generates a certificate, but let's encrypt, like send an email to the admin or tag of the domain name?
Sure, that's a very valid question. So, if a company's DNS records are compromised, in general, the ability to generate a certificate is basically the least of their worries. I mean, if you're able to break into a company's DNS records, you can point their systems anywhere they want. Things like HTTP strict transport security can save you a little bit in that regards. But for almost every company, like, man, if you lose the keys to your DNS castle, you are just totally hosed. Someone being able to point your DNS records at a new server and get a certificate is like super low on the priority list. Same thing with breaking into the web server. If you can break into the web server, the certificates are right there. The private keys are right there. You can already grab their certificates. You're on their web server. You can already generate certificates for them. You're on their web server. You can already modify their content in place and do all sorts of really, really terrible things that are equally bad, or if not worse, than getting a certificate. So that's why they're considered to be trustaways. These are methods that have been in use by CAs for quite a long time, just because they seem to be the most reliable. There are other types of certs. So Let's Encrypt only use what are called domain-validated certificates. There are other types of certificates that do exist. The most well-known are called extended validation certificates. Those are the certificates that when you go to a website, it has like the organization's name in the URL bar in Firefox and Chrome. And those are done in a much more rigorous manner. So it's not just verifying that you own a domain. They like ask for contacts at an organization. They email a bunch of people there. They're supposed to do very rigorous checking of domain name ownership to get those particular types of certificates, which Let's Encrypt does not yet offer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think that's the end of the questions, unless I can't see anybody. All right, well, thank you all so very much for coming out to my presentation. I hope it was helpful.